Good morning, everyone. Thank you so much for being here for our last session of the nonprofit success sessions for this cycle. There will be more to come, I promise. There's so much more we've got plans, but I'm glad you all have stuck with us for these sessions and hope that you're getting a lot out of it. I'm sure most of you already are very familiar with Kirsten Stevens, but in any case, I do want to introduce her again. She is from Florida. She got her undergraduate and MBA degrees from FIU and has been active in the philanthropic sector since 2005. After living in the Bahamas for 18 years, she became instrumental in forming several successful nonprofit organizations in response to some of the devastating storms that have gone through there. Her expertise includes nonprofit NGO development, strategic planning, board development, and achieving a 501(c)(3) status. She was born and raised in Latin America, and her work spans international projects in Guatemala, Costa Rica, Panama, Mexico, Colombia, Jamaica, and the Bahamas. She is a certified nonprofit management and certified fundraising executive, and a certified board source nonprofit consultant. Through her consulting firm, the Kannico Agency, she supports nonprofits, foundations, and for-profits in maximizing social impact, identifying alternative revenue streams, and achieving organizational excellence. And I think we can all attest that the topics that we've been covering so far are getting all of us to the point where we can say we are going to be also organizationally excellent. So with no further ado, Ms. Kirsten Stevens.
Thank you. Thank you. Good morning, everyone. I'm so glad you're here this morning. I want to thank Angie and the Chamber for doing this because what they've offered you is an opportunity to really level up, to really excel in this field of fundraising and development and even just organizational management when it comes to nonprofits. So thank you, Angie. Thank you to the Chamber. Thank you to the South Broward Foundation. This really has been a wonderful series. And as a reminder, the trainings that we have done this year, so we had an in-person day together, which was an overview of everything that goes into the 501(c)(3, and yes, with a specific focus on development. But we really did an overview in our one-day session. Then we focused on grants and grant research, and we did a deep dive on that. We then moved into end-of-year fundraising because our session was in October, and we were gearing up for Giving Tuesday. We were gearing up for what were the end-of-year appeals going to look like, solicitations. What could you be doing with your board as we get to the end of the year to ensure that there's giving and that you make your end-of-year fundraising goals. And all of those sessions are recorded. Angie has wonderfully created a repository for us so that we can have all of the materials in there. And then the videos, the trainings are on YouTube. So if you need them, please reach out to Angie. Hopefully we can it would be nice to send a little recap over the next few weeks, and we'll kind of remind you where everything's located. Today's training will be in there as well. Also the workbook that I sent out last night. And let me go ahead and put that. Can I attach that in the chat? I can, right? Going to go ahead and put that in. Let's see, can I do that? I don't know if I can do that. Yes, I can. Great. Let me go ahead and attach that for any of you who may have missed that email last night. Let's see. So it's, whoops, hold on one second. Okay, give me just a moment. I'm going to drag that in there. So while I do that, does anyone have anything before we jump in that they want to touch on? Any concerns, anything that you want to just mention before we jump in? All righty. Let me just move this to the right folder. One second. Okay, so let's see if I can get that in there for you. It will be nice for you to be able to follow along here with this document. All right, it's just called Workbook. And you should see it in the chat now. And this is really a tool. This is a tool we're going to use today, but you can just hang on to it and use this as sort of a guiding document. Maybe share it with your board and your team so everyone knows what it is you're working on and how we're putting this all together. So really what we want to do today is go through your development planning for the year, but we're not just going to focus on the end result. It's about how you get there. So it's not just about the spreadsheet, the calendar, what we're doing. It's very easy to just throw things on there. What we want to do is thoughtfully and systematically work through your strategic priorities for the year for 2025, based on your organizational mission and your vision and who you are and what it is you're trying to accomplish, and build it out from there so that it all flows, it's cohesive, and you're in a really good place to make some decisions about the things you should be doing and the things you shouldn't be doing. And this also gives you a position from which to speak to well-meaning people, could be donors, could be board members, could be team members who are grasping or looking around, kind of looking for things to do, looking for events to plan, looking for ways to fundraise that just feel like they're a bit disjointed, they're a bit random. We don't feel like we have that cohesive kind of aligned focus as we go forward. So this is not only a tool to help you figure out what you need to do, but also puts you in a position to say, you know what, we already came up with our planning for the year. We're not doing that this year. Let's put it on the table maybe, or put it on the back burner for next year when we can really consider this. So let's go into, let me share my screen. I'm going to go into some slides here. All right. So can everyone see my screen? I can't see you anymore. So if I can just get someone
We're
to let me.
good. Yeah, we see it.
Perfect. Fantastic. All right. So today we're going to talk about why it's so important. We're going to talk about the key six. So these are what I consider to be the key factors in developing a plan like this. And then we'll workshop the plan. So we're actually going to pause in a few spots and kind of think things through, talk it through. I'd like to see if you all get stuck anywhere, if there's anything that sounds great philosophically, but when you really look at your own organization, you're thinking, I don't really know how I would capture that, or I'm not quite sure if our vision really resonates, or is this a strategic priority, or is this just a task that we should be working on? So we're actually going to go through that with a little more intensity. So whether you're leading a small nonprofit, whether you're managing a large development team, or you're just getting started out, maybe you're just starting, maybe you haven't launched your organization yet, but we need to have this plan for sustainability, for growth, and really to maximize impact. There has to be a way that we are seeing ourselves move forward. So if you don't have one, that's fine. That's why we're here. And this is why we're going to break down the essential components of it so that you know how to put one together, or you can have other people help you put one together. But we're looking at really having a framework and being able to align that with our mission and our fundraising goals. So we know that the annual development plan is important because we understand that if we don't have one, we get into this reactive mode. We rely on the last minute appeals. We're looking at, sometimes we have annual shortfalls and we feel overwhelmed. We feel like we're in survival mode. We're really frustrated. We're trying to figure out why haven't we raised the money? Why do we find ourselves in this position over and over and over again, year after year? So, really the need is for the proactive fundraising. It's also for alignment, it's for clarity, it's for accountability, and to track progress. So what I want to mention first, though, is I've seen firsthand what can happen when there isn't a plan. I've seen firsthand the success when there is a plan. So an organization that I got involved with when I first moved to Florida, and we've had this very circuitous kind of route to wind up back in Florida, but I had just moved here from North Carolina, and I was just kind of getting immersed in what was happening in South Florida in terms of development. And this was about 10 or 12 years ago. I worked with a nonprofit that was passionate about serving at-risk youth. And they had incredible programs, and they had a very dedicated team and very well known actually in the community. So they were doing some things really well. But every single year, it was the same thing. We don't have enough money. We didn't raise enough money this year. I'm frustrated. My board isn't fundraising. Why aren't people out in the community just donating? Why don't we get more corporate sponsors? And they actually relied really heavily on one fundraising event a year. And if the event didn't go as they had planned, they didn't sell enough tickets, or they didn't have enough people, call to heart, make a big gift, make a pledge. They were scrambling, and this just happened over and over and over again. So they were several years into this. So when I started working with them, the first thing I did was ask, is there any type of plan? Do you have something? Is there something already in place? And there wasn't. So we put one together for them. And we moved away from the focus on one event to diversifying their revenue streams. And that included starting a monthly giving program. So for the donors who had given maybe once a year or twice a year, we started working with them carefully to create this monthly giving, recurring giving, which made it so easy because then we had dependable income we could count on. We were really stewarding donors carefully, so we actually mapped it out. Who were the donors that we were going to reach in January, in February? What could we invite them to? Were there community events happening? Was there maybe a chamber gathering that we could invite people to? Or was there some other event for another nonprofit that we could invite people to? But just mapping out our donor stewardship so that it was intentional and thoughtful, and then also looking at grant opportunities. January is such a perfect time for this because typically we have foundations looking at their competitive grant making process over 4 quarters during the year. So they'll have the first quarter, maybe by February, end of February, they start to review any applications that have come in. They make decisions in March, and funds are typically dispersed maybe April, May. But you've got this sequence happening throughout the year. So if you don't know what grants are coming up and what their deadlines are, or their LOIs, or even just what their strategy is, a lot of the foundations that I'm familiar with in Palm Beach County will have an initial LOI due maybe November. And then their review starts in February, funds are released in June. Well, that all needs to be factored into your fundraising, your preparation of a proposal, maybe a site visit and getting ready for that. What's that going to look like? So we really, once we had identified all of this and we've mapped it out, and we started out very simple. It was not complicated to begin with. We started out very simply. They didn't have a staff. They had a founder who was doing all of the work. And so we made it bearable and manageable for him to do this. And within a year, their fundraising and their revenue had increased by 40%. So that's a huge, huge jump. And that's what's possible. But there has to be the structure in place. So you're really transforming fundraising and development from something stressful, something we don't feel like doing, and something very uncertain to a very structured and strategic effort. So that's what we're really focusing on. And the predictability of the planning process and what it brings with it is what really allows you to plan for the growth. So if we, let me just see, I'll give you an example of something that it may or may not resonate. If you look at, or maybe other people have pointed out to you, oh, there's this grant out there. It looks perfect for us. The due date is in 2 days. We've got to submit. We just can't miss this opportunity. Those are the scenarios that we're trying to avoid. That's why it is so tempting to do this type of thing. But then you're trying to figure out even what program is it going to fund? Oh, and they don't fund operating costs. Well, now how are we going to frame this? These are the types of things. And I don't know if that resonates with anyone. Can I just see, does that ring a bell with anyone? Is that something that, yeah, okay. Okay, this is what we want to avoid. This is not a healthy state of mind. This is not a healthy way for us to operate and to run these nonprofits that we are so passionate about and we feel so strongly about. So let's really focus on moving away from the reactiveness and also allowing other people to get involved. So if we have a plan and we've shared the plan, you can get buy-in from everyone. So now, even if you may have well-meaning volunteers, they could maybe take a piece of this. Grant research, there's, in fact, on Candid and Foundation Directory, when you sign up for a subscription, and you can do month to month if you'd like, they have a training video. They have an actual training. It's a 1-hour excellent training video. I've started using that instead of my own training video. I have videos that I used to use to teach people how to do grant research. They have a wonderful 1-hour training video. You could give that to someone, ask them to watch the video, and then have them tackle some of the grant research for you. But if we haven't mapped that out and figured out that that's what we're meant to be doing in the month of January so we can see what grants there are coming up, we don't even have that to delegate, right? But that all needs to be visible, needs to be shared with everyone. So let's talk for a second then about what happens when we don't have a plan, because that scenario exists as well. And we know that we know that when we go somewhere and it's so funny because this happened to me yesterday. I misplaced my phone and I knew it was somewhere in my house, but I thought, wow, so I never wrote down the address of where I'm going. I can get in the car and start heading in that direction and just hope I'll figure it out. But, this is the same concept, right? So if we don't know really where we're going, we just feel disorganized, we get frustrated, and all kinds of obstacles come up that we can't actually handle. So the other thing with planning is that it allows you a little bit of space to handle things that may pop up. But you may have opportunities to connect with your donors. You're missing out on those. You have resources that are wasted because you just don't know really where you should be doubling down and putting your time and energy. So I would say, honestly, for me, the biggest piece is the donor side. I feel that the personalized communication, and I know a lot of you have heard me say this before about my whole philosophy on thank you notes, right? Well, if I don't carve out the time, and I typically do it on Friday, so I gave up my time this morning because I'm going to have to do them later today, but every Friday, it's on my calendar. I know that I spend an hour to 2 hours writing handwritten thank you notes. That's just what I do. And I do them on little cards. It's not even a letter, it's a card. Well, that's my stewardship. So that might be stewardship of clients, it could be stewardship of donors, but those are the things that are important because we are building relationships. This is not transactional. I don't even call this fund development. I call it relationship development. It's about partners. It's partner engagement. It's community engagement. And so we're missing out on critical ways to deepen those relationships if we haven't come up with our system, if we don't have a focus, and if we don't have it on our calendars. So we're going to develop this annual development plan, but then how is that going to tie into your personal calendar? So your calendar every day needs to have the elements of this plan that apply to you and maybe to your team, whether it's meetings, whether it's the donor stewardship. But I tell you, I have seen donors that have been lost and lapsed because there was just no follow-up. And going back and cleaning that up is hard because then you have some answers that you have to come up with. Where have you guys been? I didn't even really know you were still in existence. Oh, well, we thought that after the new ED came in that things had changed and maybe you had shifted priorities. And so now we're trying to build back up a relationship that we could have just maintained in the first place. So for me, I would say the biggest part to me that's important is the donor stewardship. And so if we have that very clearly outlined and we know where we're going, we know where we're heading with this, then we have an opportunity to strengthen and have them feel so good about the organization that they bring people in. That's the ideal scenario. Focus groups, that's a great way to engage donors. Put it on your calendar. Let's do a focus group in March. Let's do a focus group in October. What are we going to do? Well, let's get on Zoom and have the ED give us an update of all the things that are happening in 2025. Wonderful. It is a great way to engage your donors. It's also a really neat way to segment your higher level donors. So maybe you have kind of your top 10 donors that have given over $1,000 in the past couple of years and they've been consistent. Well, maybe that's a perk. Maybe that's something you can say, you know what, you've been such a loyal, faithful donor. We would love to have you more engaged. Would you be willing to sit in on a focus group or a lunch and learn about what we're working on in the coming 6 months? But focus groups I like because I feel like there's some buy-in. They feel like they're being asked for their opinion, their thoughts, their suggestions. And you have to be careful because we don't want to give the impression that we're just going to adopt every great idea that comes out of a focus group. But I think when they get to see the inner workings, it's a nice feeling for your donors, and I think it's a great way to build those relationships. And you can do it with corporate sponsors as well. You can do it. I mean, if depending on your relationship with funders, you could have that with funders also. Some of them, I'm seeing more and more funders become very invested in the community and in organizations. So when we talk about the only other one I want to mention here is the resources. So we tend to spend time and money sometimes on things like galas, auctions, raffles, golf tournaments. And honestly, sometimes they just don't bring enough revenue in to justify the cost. And we have to figure out whether, and we have to be very discerning, is this something we should be doing? There are a lot of galas out there. Fundraising does not mean events. Fundraising means your entire development effort. So with depth, with a solid infrastructure, with thoughtfulness, with planning. So being discerning about that is important. I would say also writing grant proposals maybe that just don't fit. That's another wasted resource. And if we haven't spent the time to really figure out where we're heading and what the programs are that we're trying to fund, we're just throwing spaghetti at the wall. So we've covered, we've covered all of these elements that I think are the negative side. But when we go back to the upside, part of it is also your peace of mind. The last thing we want is for you to wake up every day and feel like, oh my gosh, what fell through the cracks? What fell through the cracks? What haven't I done? What do I need to be doing? Let me scramble here. Yeah, let's get some social media posts out. Yeah, that's the last thing we want for you. That is not leadership excellence. Leadership excellence is knowing what you're focused on every day. And maybe when you do this, you identify two gaping holes in your staffing or your team. Okay, let's accept where we are right now and what we can afford and what our budget will allow. But let's start our wish list. What would be the next position you would hire for? Maybe it's a VA. Maybe it's someone to handle emails and communications and scheduling calls and meetings and so on. Maybe it's someone to follow up with those donors. Those thank you cards don't have to be written by you. They could be written by someone else. They can sign your name on it. Just saying. I mean, yes, it's good to do it yourself, but maybe right now you don't have the luxury of sitting down for an hour, 2 hours and getting those done. So really thinking about what could we be doing? And that also, I think that's helpful because it gives you hope. You need to have hope that you're going to bring in enough funding, that you'll be able to fill these slots. But also, what if you did have this strong relationship with your donors and they said to you, what do you need the most right now? What would be the most helpful to you? Wouldn't it be great to be able to give them an answer? I think it would be fantastic. So let's go into the key components of the plan. So we'll start with the mission and vision alignment. So that is where we really want to make sure that we are clear on why we exist and what we're doing. Your vision is going to be, what does success look like in the future? If we could accomplish everything we wanted to do, what does that look like? And we're going to go through these in a little more detail, because if you look at your workbook, which I put it in the chat, but I know when new people join, I don't know if you can still see it. Let me stop sharing for just a second. Okay, was everybody able to grab the workbook out of the chat? It looks like this. Okay. Anyone didn't get it? Angela, I know that you joined recently. Were you able to grab that? Was it still in there?
And she emailed it this morning, Kirsten.
Perfect. Fantastic. Okay, great. All right. So this gives you your little guide to work through. Okay. And let me just say also, you don't all need a fancy strategic plan. You don't. If you were to put together this type of plan, that's good enough for now. A strategic plan is wonderful, and I would love to see you all go through that process at some point, but it can be very expensive. It's also very time consuming. I don't know how much time each of you has to sit with a consultant and work through what the planning is going to look like and set aside a day for a board retreat and then ask your board members to spend a whole day on this. If you're in early stages, or even if you're well established and you already have an existing plan, or you have one from a few years ago, you can put together this annual development plan, and then you can enhance it and kind of turn it into an operational plan. So you incorporate some programmatic elements. That's good enough. That is good enough. You do not. So I don't know how to disconnect my phone from my screen. Anyway, I apologize. So don't be intimidated by this whole concept of strategic planning. If you work through this planner, you've basically done your strategic planning for the year. And it isn't, okay, if a funder says to you, oh, did you go through a strategic planning process? Well, no, but our team worked on a planner and we have our goals clearly outlined and we're clear about our mission and our vision and our alignment. that works. It works. It may not be exactly what they're envisioning as a strategic plan because you didn't spend $15,000, $20,000 on a 9-month exercise of going through this, but it's a start and it gives you all clarity on what you're doing. So, yes. All right. So then the next piece of that is let me go back to sharing. Okay. All right. So the next one is going to be your strategic priorities. And the way we're going to get to that is with a SWOT analysis. So we're going to run through that quickly too, and I'll give you some examples. Then we want to come up with our SMART fundraising goals. So we'll be very, very clear about our specific, measurable, achievable, relevant, and time-bound goals. That then helps us come up with our fundraising goals. So we've identified then what are the SMART goals, and from those we're going to pick what we're going to work on as our fundraising goals. Our actionable strategies. So what is the strategy behind each of these goals that we've selected? The timeline and milestones for each of those. And then we're going to figure out the accountability. So how is that going to work? Who's going to handle it? Who's going to oversee it? Who's in charge? So let me ask you, just so I have an idea, if we can do a little show of hands. Who is a one-person operation and they're basically doing everything? Can you give me a show of hands? Okay. And who has a team, even if it's just one or two other people or very involved board members okay. All right, great. Okay. All right. And okay. So we've got a couple of people that are doing this pretty much by themselves. How do you pronounce your name? Is it Josepha?
Josepha.
Josepha, are you in early stages?
Yes, I've been in existence since 2014, but I recently retired last January, so now I'm fully focused on the nonprofit.
Perfect. Okay, fantastic. Good. So you know enough, but you're still kind of this relaunch is kind of on your shoulders.
Yes.
Okay, excellent. All right. Okay, so let's go into the whoops, I think I missed hold on one second. Who did I saw a comment there that I may have missed.
That was just me answering your question about having a team. I have a team on the profit side. I haven't launched my nonprofit as yet, but that's why I've been attending your workshops.
Preparation. That's great. Okay, do I have some recommended individuals that should work on the strategic priorities workbook? I would say, thank you for that question, Dustin. I would say the people that are most heavily invested. So it could be a key volunteer. It could be your board members. It could be team members. It could be you and your assistant. But whoever you feel really has the interest in thinking this through, really being very strategic and deliberate and intentional in the goals. What I don't recommend is to invite everyone. I'm working with a team out in California and they said, oh, we like everybody's opinion. Yep. And so that means there are 7 opinions on what needs to happen in the coming year. So we have to be careful. I say, I like to collect it all ahead of time. What thoughts do you have? Maybe do a little survey. What ideas do you have? And then from there, come up with a core 2-3 people that are really working on this in great detail and can be discerning about what needs to be focused on. Okay, great. All right, so let's go back to, let me just go back to my slides here. Okay. All right, so let's go into mission and vision. So we're going to do a deep dive on this. So your mission statement, these really, they're not just the things that we're going to put on the website. That's the first thing we think of is, okay, well, we need to put up a website. We need to write our case for support. What's the mission and vision? So these really are the guiding principles of everything that happens in the organization. One of the things that is missing from this, by the way, is core values. I don't always include it, but I think core values are important too. But this is the why. So if we think about, and there can be some confusion between mission and vision because they tend to overlap a little bit, but we're thinking about what does the organization do? Who do we serve? And how do we make an impact? That would be your mission. Vision would be what long-term change are we looking to see? What does the world look like when we've accomplished everything we want to accomplish? What does that look like? So let me give you a couple of examples. So this would be a nonprofit that's focused maybe on youth mentorship. Their mission statement could be, we provide mentorship and educational programs for underserved youth to empower them for success. It's what we do. It's how we do it. It's why we do it. A vision statement for them could be a future where every child has the tools to reach their full potential. So that's what I would want to see if I get to my maximum goal and I put myself out of business as a nonprofit. What have I achieved? What does that landscape look like? So when we have these fundraising efforts aligned, it's so clear for donors and funders to understand why their support is so critical. So if the fundraising doesn't match up or it feels disjointed, and this is something that, that's why we have to be careful with these events too, because in our quest for events, do we lose a little bit of this alignment with our mission and vision? And what I would say is find things, maybe, I don't know if many of you have a physical building or if you have actual activities that people come to, or if it's virtual, or if, you're a hybrid where you go into schools and do particular work, or you go into communities and do specific work. But find things that you're already doing and invite people to those, leverage those, turn those into partner engagement opportunities rather than a golf tournament, which can be wonderful, don't get me wrong. But when we get a group of golfers out on a golf course, they're really there for the golf. Are they going to be your long-term donors for the organization? Are they really going to be engaged? I don't know, maybe they are. But I'm just saying, let's think about ways that we are deeply connecting our mission and vision to what we do. Another big risk when we aren't really clear about this is when we have a campaign or a program or an effort that's an initiative that's happening that's based on a funder's desire to fund it. We cannot always make it fit, and we have to have the clarity and the courage to know what is going to work and what isn't going to work because it's aligned or not aligned. So I see this a lot where people come forward and they say, well, I'd like a program that's, we'd like to name it after our family and we'd like it to be the such and such program, but it isn't really a good fit. Well, we have a couple of options. We can go back and have those conversations with the donors about our mission and vision. And do they see a way maybe of connecting a little more fully, a little more holistically with what we do? Or we simply have to say, unfortunately, that's just not the direction that the organization is going in. We don't feel that that's a very good fit. However, we have these other things that we do that are also with youth. Maybe those would be of interest to you. Maybe you would be willing, we want to get creative and offer them some options. But that's where I really see some of this mission drift, mission creep, mission drift. We hear about that all the time. That's how that happens. We're trying to bend ourselves into these shapes to fit what funders want, what donors want. And that's not really what we want when it comes to our organization. We have to be supporting our core purpose. What is our core purpose? And that's the way we build long-term sustainability and integrity so that our donors and the community know exactly who we are, what we stand for, what we're accomplishing. So let's think about for a second about a mission and vision statement. Lisa, I'm going to pick on you. Do you feel that you would be able to capture your mission and vision statement effectively? Or have you already?
So for my nonprofit, I've done none of the strategic planning work, beginning with, I call it MVV, mission, vision, values. For my profit, yes. And I do train this stuff as an HR consultant, so I better be able to do it.
Great. Well, so I love that you have the clarity on the path for that. what I want to encourage all of you too is don't hesitate to revisit an existing mission and vision statement. There is nothing wrong with that. You can revise it, you can tweak it. Maybe you've moved into a little bit of a different direction. There's nothing wrong with tweaking your mission and vision statement. And we want to make sure that we're not, we don't hesitate with that. We have to make sure that every part of this, the mission and the vision is aligned with what we're doing today and what we're hoping to accomplish. So let me share my screen again. I'll give you a couple more examples, maybe for just for clarity, in case we need to just kind of build this out a little bit further. So let's look at a mission statement to empower underprivileged youth by providing educational opportunities, mentorship, and access to essential resources for personal and academic success. So this is a fairly long one. There are a few different things that are being done here, and that's totally fine. You can build this out as long as you're broad enough and you're not being too specific about what the essential resources are, because maybe those will change. But it's totally fine to include a few things in there if you want. Your vision statement in this case would be a community where every child has the tools and support to achieve their fullest potential, regardless of socioeconomic status. So that would be the vision statement. Now, how does that mission inform the fundraising efforts? Our fundraising efforts focus on programs that provide scholarships, tutoring, and mentorship for youth, ensuring alignment with our mission of empowerment and education. And then for donor engagement, we want them connecting with the vision of transforming these young lives. So that already then puts us in this frame of mind of, okay, who's my ideal donor? What is their interest? How can I connect with them to share with them what we're doing? This isn't, oh, I was in the museum last week in West Palm Beach and I saw all the donors to the museum and I'm just going to start reaching out to them. So that would be kind of the scramble. That would be the, oh, let's just grab some names and hope that we can add them to a newsletter and they'll start supporting us. But really being thoughtful and intentional about the people that we're connecting with. And most of this is going to happen really through your board members, through the community, through people who know you, your contacts and connections. That's really how we tend to align best with the donor community. But does that make sense that there's a thoughtfulness behind this? There's an intention behind this, and it is driven by what's guiding our organization. Does anyone have any thoughts or comments on that? Okay. And if you do, please speak up or put something in the chat, and Angie will track that for us and make sure that I stop and address. So you have in the workbook, we have revisiting the mission or writing your new mission. We have a couple of questions to double check it. We have revisiting or writing your vision statement. And does it provide a clear picture of where you want to be in 3 to 5 years or beyond, right? And then we want to look at the alignment. So if we have a program or initiative, is it connected to our mission and vision, and how does it connect? And what could be improved maybe? So identifying some of the gaps. Number 2, reflecting on the connection, considering resource allocation. So are the resources being distributed well to support the mission and vision of the organization? That's a key question. Do we really have the effort going into the areas that are critical? And then are there any potential new programs and efforts that could align really well and support the mission and vision? So let's go into, this is a good place to get into the strategic priorities, starting with the SWOT analysis. And the SWOT analysis is your strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. Sometimes it's called a SCOT analysis, which is your challenges instead of weaknesses. Sometimes it's a SOAR analysis, your strengths, opportunities, aspirations. So you can really look at this any way you'd like. You can put a more positive spin on it. When I do strategic planning, sometimes they say, no, we don't want a SWOT. It's really it's a little bit of a downer. We don't want to hear about the weaknesses and the threats. But what I would say is I think it's important regardless. And, again, being unafraid to have these conversations and have take a hard look at what we do. To me, that's super important. I'm not afraid to do that, and I think that there's a lot of value to be gained. So if we look at categories like board development, programming, fundraising, the priorities that come out of this are going to be built on your SWOT analysis. So if we were to do, here's an example of one. So our strengths. We have strong relationships with local businesses. We have engaged and supportive board members. We have positive community reputation. Our weaknesses might be limited staff capacity for grant applications, outdated donor management software. I see this a lot. Inconsistent donor stewardship efforts. So what are the opportunities that present themselves then? And the opportunities are, these are really internal. These are things that you can be doing to grow the organization, but they also spill over into your external relationships as well. So increasing interest in youth empowerment programs, new government grants for educational programs, partnering with schools for joint initiatives. And then some of the threats, so weaknesses typically are internal. We're looking inside. The threats could be on the landscape. We also need to be realistic about that. We have a new administration coming in. Does that impact what we're doing? Is that a threat? So rising competition from similar nonprofits, economic downturn, which may affect individual giving, policy changes that affect the grant eligibility of organizations. So these are all really good ways to identify where we have opportunities to strengthen. So then the key really is, how do we turn these items that we've identified, these issues that we've identified, or these opportunities, how are we moving them into our strategic priorities? What do we do with them? So let's say we have a strong existing donor database, but we are really not getting a lot of recurring donations. Okay. Or maybe we just say our donor database is inconsistent, giving is inconsistent. So one of the strategic priorities to remedy that would be launch a monthly giving program. We mentioned that before. What if we have great corporate sponsorship opportunities? We know they exist out there. I mean, this is South Florida. We are, and I speak of South Florida, and so for any of you that may be outside Florida, it applies everywhere. There are opportunities rampant out there for you to develop strong partnerships with corporations and with companies, even small businesses. So if you know that those opportunities are out there, but maybe you just don't have an outreach strategy, maybe you haven't put something together. And by the way, a great way to get started with this is to repurpose your case for support. Just put a different spin on it, turn it into an opportunity for corporations to get involved, for them to get excited about supporting the organization. And now you have a packet that you could send them, you could show up with. You can start with some phone calls or some emails and then follow up and say, I'm really looking for ways to engage and form some partnerships in the community. This is what we do. I'd like to talk to you a little bit more in person. Could I swing by for a meeting? But maybe there just hasn't been an effort, a concerted effort. So if we know it's out there, then that could, but we haven't done anything about it. There's our weakness. Well, the strategic priority might be to really double down and put some effort into that. But this is where we have to be very careful, because if we don't have the team to do it, if we are doing this by ourselves, if we are maybe just relaunching, then maybe now's not the time. So you can have your list of priorities, but then you're going to have to go back and look through and figure out which ones you can really handle, which ones you can take on. What if we have one event? I talked about that earlier. We depend on one event for all of our fundraising. It's our strength because maybe we've generated some revenue every year. Our net is positive, wonderful, but we sure are dependent on that one event. What if we have a hurricane? What if something happens and we have to cancel the event? What if it just can't happen this year? What if it loses money this year? So then one of the strategic priorities would be to diversify the revenue. Maybe our annual appeal could be strengthened. Maybe we need to do two campaigns per year. Instead of focusing only on end of year, October to December, we do a spring campaign that starts in March, April, May. And then we have our end of year as well. So sorry. Here, let's do this. Let's just turn this off. I don't know if you all can hear that when it comes through, but it sure is distracting my mind. All right. Okay, so diversifying revenue, you could increase some grant applications. Again, we have to really be very intentional. And you're looking for 3 to 5 strategic priorities. That's really what we're looking for. So let's go into the fundraising goals. So the fundraising goals are going to be driven by your strategic priorities. Your strategic priorities are driven by really looking at some questions maybe, and maybe there's some, there are questions that you could be asking a few of the people that work with you. There are also questions you should ask yourself, because we often know inside what are the things we need to be focusing on. But I'll give you a few of them to just kind of start the thinking. What is your biggest fundraising challenge right now? Maybe let's open this up. Does anyone have something they'd like to offer on that? If I say, what's your biggest fundraising challenge? What could that be? Does anyone have a thought?
Sure, I'll go.
Great.
So for me, it's the pretty much not having a team, or right now a small board that's, busy themselves, is not very engaged. So just direction in that area. My event, my gala, so to speak, is a bit different. I don't want to take up too much time, but I have an event that it started out honoring women in public service. My
Mm.
first brunch drew 250 individuals. The second year, I did it 3 years. The second year, 350. And the third year, October, was 500.
Mm.
The problem is there are a lot of, I'm honoring service personnel in the community. So I don't have big donors in attendance.
Mhm.
So it doesn't
Mm.
it's a great event, but it doesn't necessarily attract the big donors. And that's where I'm stuck. Should I continue to have it? It has to be sustainable though. So it's a bit of an anomaly, but I'm not sure what to do next October.
Okay. Does it break even or generate revenue for you? Do you make any?
Last year we lost.
You lost money. Okay. All right. So what I would say too is the concern about losing revenue. So that's an issue. That's where we have to really take a look at how can you have a great attendance. 500 is a wonderful number. There must be a way to entice corporate sponsors to underwrite a great deal of this for you and be supporters. They are getting 500 people in a room that they are going to see their logo, their brand, their company. They're going to hear about their social engagement, about their corporate social responsibility philosophy. I mean, it's a wonderful opportunity. So when I look at that, I think, okay, that's where I would double down 100%. The other thing is you said attracting big donors. It's very hard to attract big donors. Donors need to be cultivated and prospected. And this means you sit with your board members and with some of the people that have attended in the past who may have some influence, and you go through this exercise of asking them who they can bring, who would be a wonderful prospect for this event, who needs to learn about this. So again, we put up a website, we put a donate button. Oh, why don't we have more donors? They're not just going to show up. We have this wonderful event. And here's the thing too, we see it from the inside, but we're not seeing it from the outside. We think the whole world knows about our event. We think everyone's hearing about how the great work that we're doing and how they can come and learn more, and they can meet some of these women that have been so phenomenal and they're accomplished. But we're probably not even touching the outer circle of their universe. So it has to be intentional, and your outreach has to be intentional and focused and deliberate. So it's coming from you. We're not attracting, we are going out and getting them and bringing them to our events. We are facilitating their entry into our ecosystem. Really, really important. The default is to just kind of send this out and just hope that, our list will grow and that people will hear about it and they'll get excited. But your board members, if they gave you 5 or 10 names of individuals that, even if it's a stretch, right? It's the bank manager, it's a high level donor, even if it's a stretch, if they have any connections to them and they pick up the phone and say, we are hosting this event, I'd like you to be my special guest because I want you to learn about this. Now we've become proactive. Now we've really taken this, we have gained control over the ability to bring in major donors. They're not all going to accept, they're not all going to show up, but you've started the conversation. Your board members have started the conversation, and there's a great way to hand this off, right? The board member could say, I'd like you to come. And by the way, if you have any time, I'd like you to meet the executive director. We're going to go for coffee afterwards. You could even, this is a great pretext too. You could invite them for coffee or lunch or have some opportunity to engage with them. Ask them what they thought. Ask them what they thought of the event. So you have now a path to continue building that relationship. But attracting is where I think we fall short, and we sort of feel like, oh gosh, I'm doing so much else really. And now I have to invite them. Yeah, you do. You do. But I would look at corporate sponsorships for you. I think that's an amazing, amazing opportunity. So again, if we're thinking about the strategic priorities, what opportunities exist that you have not fully explored? We all have them. We do. I bet all of us could sit down right now and think of 2 or 3 things that we have not explored. How can you turn that into one of your priorities? And then what's one thing that if you improved could have the biggest impact on your financial sustainability? Again, we all have an idea of what that could be. Maybe we don't know the how. We don't have to know the how right now. If you surround yourself with people that can be mentors, if you continue to build your professional network, your colleagues, your peer, even right here, on this webinar, I bet there are people that have ideas or have done something that could be helpful to you if you're stuck and you're trying to think of ways that you could really solidify your financial sustainability or opportunities that you could pursue. So don't be shy about including people in this process. When we do strategic planning, I insist on speaking with all of the board members, community stakeholders. Who do you partner with? Who do you work with? And I spend time with all of them. That's why it's a big project. That's why it takes a long time, because to me, if I really want help for this organization or for my organization, I need to hear from people. It can't be all in my head and the board as well. Sometimes the board can be very insular and they're just looking internally. But what's out there? What other ideas? Talk to consultants. Consultants will give you an hour of their time. They'll help give you some ideas. But often, even in our own networks, there are peers. Talk to entrepreneurs. We tend to come to a lot of nonprofit gatherings and networking. So it's fabulous, but there's a whole universe of people that have built very, very successful businesses and would probably be happy to mentor you a little bit as well. And if they have the entrepreneurial mindset, who knows what they could bring to the table in terms of thoughts, suggestions, ideas, opportunities you may have missed, So if you're running out of ways that you could, find other, in fact, I made a list. It's called, Are You Out of Ideas for Fundraising? Shift the focus to co-creating with input from the community you serve. Hold listening sessions with your stakeholders. Hold an internal workshop where you brainstorm compelling stories using your organization's data. Use storytelling more instead of just setting funding goals so that your financial targets are more meaningful. Reverse engineer a future press release. So figure out, okay, if it were December 31st, what did we accomplish? Okay, now what would we want to do to get to that? Top 10 donors of the future. Who could be your major donors in the future? Just think about individuals, businesses you haven't engaged with, and figure out ways to cultivate those relationships. Who's connected to some of those? Just ask, find out. Goal setting. You can even use AI to help you come up with ideas. And then cross-sector collaborations as well. So again, I just mentioned the for-profits. I mean, that's another really good way. I know a couple of organizations that have a partnership, and they look every year so these are associations like other chambers and so on. Every year they'll look for-profit businesses that they can pair up with a nonprofit. It's a whole program. And there's mentorship and shared information. A lot of these businesses don't even really know how a nonprofit works. So they're learning as well. There's value both ways. And you have the opportunity then to grow your potential board network and support your board recruiting efforts as well. Okay, so do we feel like we can come up with strategic priorities based on the SWOT, based on where we saw these bigger weaknesses and challenges? Okay, to help offset. All right, so now we go into our SMART fundraising goals. And I'm going to give you some examples of some really good ones. All right, our annual gala campaign. So if we want our specific goals, our SMART goals, we start with the specifics. We're going to raise $75,000. We're not just going to raise more money. We're going to raise $75,000 for our programming. Could be, I'm going to raise $100,000 for my operations this year. Measurable. We're going to achieve it through ticket sales. This is the amount, and sponsorships. Achievable. We want to be realistic. So it'll be 10 corporate sponsors and 250 tickets. It's going to be relevant because it's going to fund our flagship mentoring initiative. And it's going to be time bound. So that would be a SMART goal for a gala, for example. Well, what if we have a recurring donor campaign? I think this is one area that a lot of people aren't intentional about. I know that when we go to the checkout button or the donate button on a lot of nonprofit pages, it'll say, would you like to make this a recurring monthly donation? You know, that's an easy thing to overlook, especially in this day and age where we're being asked to subscribe for everything. I mean, even Amazon, right? They're like, would you like this to be a regular monthly purchase? No, I'd like to just purchase it one time. It's very easy to sort of gloss over that. I think we need to really put a little more time and thoughtfulness into getting our donors to become recurring donors. I don't think they truly understand what that could look like. And maybe that's an infographic. Maybe you have something that you send out to your newest donors that's kind of an add-on to a thank you, or it's after a month after they've given. Why we rely so heavily on recurring gifts. Could be a recurring gift of $10 a month. It's $120 a year versus a $10 gift once a year. And so when you think about forecasting and what the picture could look like, and the stark difference between having 250 donors that give one time, or 150 that give one time, and 100 of those that are your recurring donors, now we have a real opportunity to forecast revenue and keep them engaged. We have this audience that has invested in us. We can keep them really connected with the work that's happening. So a recurring donor campaign could be enroll 50 new monthly donors by the end of the year. Maybe you have a membership program. Could be a membership campaign. Same thing. Let's enroll 50 new members by the end of the year. Measurable. So we're targeting a $20 average gift, generating $12,000 a year. A $20 average gift for 50 monthly donors. It's $12,000 of basically found money, right? Achievable. So we're going to leverage the existing donor base. We're going to launch a social media campaign. I'm a big fan of email campaigns. An email campaign with a video from you. I mean, it's not hard. You can do it on your phone. Let me tell you why recurring donors mean so much to us. This is what it means for the future of our organization. This is how we are going to achieve our vision. Your gift that could be a one-time gift converted to a recurring gift could change the future of this organization. So think about ways that you can get that message out. I really do love the video from an ED or from a board member or a donor who has become a recurring donor. So think about ways that you can make this achievable using your existing donor base, and ideally it is people that have already given. So going back and talking to the people that have made a gift, but even the new ones that come on, make sure that you're putting enough time and thought into how we are going to convert them to recurring donors. When they first make their gift and that pops up, often they don't know enough about you. They've been compelled by something to make that first gift. And so it's very easy for them to gloss over, but then they never get another chance to become a recurring donor until the next time they give, which may be in a year. So now 12 months have passed when we could have been really cultivating them to turn into a recurring donor. So think about ways you can do that. So we want it to be relevant. So it's going to increase unrestricted funding to support our operations. We need that. And then time bound. That's the other thing, by the way, the recurring donors, a lot of those funds, if you are careful about how you're conveying the message, that money can go directly into operations. So be careful about putting up too many campaigns or having too many restrictions on your gifts, because inevitably you'll wind up with too much money in programming, not enough to keep the lights on. And then time bound. So how are we going to do this? 10 new donors each quarter. That's what we're going to do. That's going to be our goal. And then if we have a major gifts initiative, so we want to secure $100,000 in major gifts from 5 donors this year. Great. Measurable. We're tracking progress by identifying those prospects, and we're going to make at least 15 asks. It's probably going to have to be more than 15. Use your board connections and your stewardship events to cultivate these relationships. Make it achievable. Again, we just talked about this when we were talking about the event. So using your board connections, stewarding the individual donors at events, bring them, invite them, tell them about things that you're doing. Use what you have already. We're not talking about creating new events. We're talking about who does the board know? Who do your strong volunteers know? Who is in your universe, maybe even personally, professionally, outside church, family group or parent groups that et cetera. So use your connections, use the board connections, and then leverage those events. And then we make it relevant. The funds will cover the capital improvements for the new community center. Excellent. And time bound. We're closing these gifts by December 31st. Closing the gifts means you either have a pledge or you have the cash in hand. I'm a big fan of pledges. And it's something that if you have a major donor show up on the scene, always keep that in mind. That is a great opportunity for you to look at a way that you could turn this into a 3-year gift or a 5-year gift. So if you have the opportunity and you're sitting with a donor, just like we talk about the recurring monthly donations, see if you can have this conversation about a 3-year gift or a 5-year gift, depending on what they're thinking of giving. Because again, this helps us project, it helps us forecast, it puts us in such a better position really to figure out where we stand and make sure that we are sustainable and we know what's coming in automatically. Those donors, once they've made the pledge, they're not legally bound by it, but if you do a good job of looking after them and really creating a nice, solid relationship with them, they will continue to support you and they will continue to honor that pledge as they should. But unfortunately, they're not locked in, and I've had that situation too, where people back out. So hopefully that doesn't happen, but circumstances change for people. Life happens, medical emergencies, shift in priorities. People have children, that sometimes really changes things. So let's think about some smart fundraising goals. So what could be a fundraising, a smart goal that one of you might have? Just throw something out there. What could it be? We want to stay away from just raise more money, right? Or maybe that is the broader goal, but how can we turn that into something that's really intentional? Who has an idea? Dan.
Yeah, I was going to say, you know, recruit an influencer to your cause.
Okay.
Maybe you want to mention a specific influencer or
Mhm.
category of influencers, but
Great. Okay. So to be specific, we're going to recruit one influencer this year who's going to help champion our cause. Well, measurable is we're going to have to approach probably, I don't know, what do you think, Dan? 3 to 5, possibly, to see if we can get a good fit or gauge their interest. I don't know. I don't know much about the influencer world, but I would imagine you have to speak to a few different people, right?
yeah, you got to research agencies, you got to
There we
read
go.
profiles, you've got to be very selective, unless you have like a natural, person
Yes.
in your orbit.
Oh my gosh, and wouldn't that be wonderful? But again, that's great. So we have recruiting our influencer that, might already be in our orbit. So achievable would be the fact that we already have some sort of connection to them. Relevance would be that they are going to be invested in this effort and they're going to go out and champion it. And then time bound is we're going to get that person on board by June 30th.
Mhm.
Because that I think can happen a little sooner, and that'll give you an additional 6 months of the year to monitor progress and see how things are going, set some milestones. But that's a great one. Is that what does your organization do, Dan?
We're actually we're a new platform for the charitable, the whole the giving community.
Oh,
So we deal with donors, the nonprofits, and also companies, all under one umbrella structure. And we're an app. We're app driven. Sorry about that. It's in my throat. We're an app basically.
okay.
So
Okay.
it's very easily accessible by mainly the younger generation.
Okay. And so you probably also have some goals of bringing on members, subscribers, users of the platform, right?
Correct. Yeah, correct.
So you've got those mapped out. Again, you've got your SMART goals. You're specific about how many people you're bringing on. You're going to be tracking the progress. It's achievable because this is something that people need. It's relevant because this is who you are, and you've got deadlines on it. So everything that you're thinking, everyone here on the call too, that's thinking about what could be achieved, what needs to happen for your organization, you can turn this into something that is a SMART goal and that really drives what the strategy is going to be behind each of those.
Absolutely, 100%.
Okay.
It should be run in nonprofit or for profit. They need to be run very similarly.
Mhm.
So
Excellent.
absolutely.
What do you do? What do you use for measuring for your metrics? Do you have KPIs or some other?
Not yet. We're still in the development stage. The app is already, we're going live in the next week. So it's been kind of like not the easiest thing to sort of lay them out all nice and organized because I'm pretty much a one-man show. I have a team, but for the most part I'm
You're
it.
driving.
So
Yes.
you gotta try different things and some things work, some things don't work.
Mhm.
But yeah,
Well, what's the name of the app? Are
it's
you able?
Rosie Giving. ROSI.
All right. Okay,
Yeah.
everybody, get on your radar.
Yeah,
Might be.
ping me a note or something if you have a nonprofit. They're really the app is really good for the younger, smaller
Mhm.
community-based nonprofits. Not really there yet for like the big behemoths, but we
Mhm.
don't really want to talk about them because we don't like them. I'm only kidding. I'm only kidding.
That's right. We like everybody. Everybody has their place, right? But no, this is great. Okay, good. Well, we'll keep an eye out for that.
Mhm.
Thanks.
Thank you.
All right. So then if we have a goal, but we haven't come up with the strategy, it's a wish. It's a hope. It's wishful thinking. And now we need to come up with what is the strategy going to be? So how are we going to achieve it? So this is where, when we're thinking of the SMART goals, I don't want you to think about the how. We need to know what those goals are and just figure out later if it's something we can do or we can't do. But we don't want to restrict ourselves in our thinking. And again, you may have 10, and we're going to boil those goals down to maybe 3 or 5 key ones. But now when we're thinking about the strategy, we really have to think about the goal as the destination. So we know where we want to go, but now we need the roadmap. And so now we need the specific steps. And this is where we're going to go into the strategies for these different areas and figure out what are the actionable strategies for each of these. So I'm going to give you some very specific ones. I don't know why this doesn't want to advance. Oh, because I'm not sharing my screen. Let's do that first. All right, so we just talked about the Major Gifts Initiative. So let's go through now. And again, I'm all about examples because it's great for me to talk about how to do it, but let's just figure out what that would look like for each area: major gift cultivation, grant applications, and stewardship plans. So major gifts. Okay. So we know that major gifts are a huge, huge part of nonprofit fundraising. I would argue the biggest piece, the most critical piece, and the element that can yield the greatest results, even in a fairly short amount of time, if you've already built the relationship. I'll give you some examples. I'm involved with a number of organizations where we do maybe management support for them throughout the year. Maybe I've done a board retreat for them, and they get towards October and they freeze because they know they have these potential funders out there, or donors, I should say, and the donors have been giving for maybe 2 or 3 years consistently. Maybe those gifts have increased in amount, which is a wonderful, wonderful sign. But oh my gosh, who's going to call? Who's going to ask? How do we know what they're going to give this year? And so I teach them how to make these calls, how to have these conversations. And the idea is, if you've done this work that we talked about with focus groups, if you've done some lunch and learns, if you've invited people to events, you've also gotten to know them on a little bit of a personal level. And that's really critical, because when you're calling people in October or you're reaching out to them, maybe you start with a letter that goes with, or a handwritten note that goes with the annual appeal. And, I always say I like to do annual appeals in October, November, December. So 3 times I send out letters. And each time I remove the people that gave after the first letter. Obviously, we want to make sure that they feel heard, that they know that we know that they gave their gift. So we're not going to keep sending the same people the letters if they made a gift after the first appeal. But I'll put a little note in there and I'll say, I know you had a crazy year this year, and I hope your mom's doing better. I just wanted to reach out and let you know that we're getting close to our end of year fundraising goals. Any gift that you make is really going to help tip the scale and make a big difference for us for next year as we lay the groundwork for a really, really successful 2025 or 2026. And so I did a lot of coaching and got people kind of teed up, assigned responsibilities. We have a weekly meeting. I say, okay, so you were going to call John Smith. Did you make that call? Sarah Curry, did you talk to her? Okay, what was the result? Okay, are you following up? I mean, this is how tactical and hardcore it is. And I hold their feet to the fire. But inevitably, they skirt around some people because they're so worried. I mean, and I know it's our fear of rejection. I totally understand that. But these are people that are already invested in the organization in some way or another. Maybe they've attended a couple of your galas. Maybe they are part of that 250 to 350 to 500. Maybe they've been there and they've actually seen and witnessed some of the great work being done. But I'll come in sometimes. I'll get sort of the desperation plea, the call on December 15th. Listen, we still have these 3 big donors and nobody's had a conversation with them. And we're just, we're floundering and we don't want to screw it up. We don't want to mess it up. What do we do? And so with one organization, I got the call actually on the 25th of December. They're like, well, we're coming up to the 31st. Is there anything you can do to help us? And so I did a deep dive and I ended up having three conversations that within 5 or 6 days that generated $28,000. And then with another organization, it was in a 2-week period, the last 2 weeks of the year, and we brought in 53,000. And this is only because someone picked up the phone and had the phone call. So we have to be, we can't leave anything on the table. I mean, what a mistake that would be, right? But we have to make sure we have the tactic for it. So with the first group that I mentioned, they started back in October and we had a plan and we outlined it. We missed the mark on a couple of people, but I will say that they raised maybe $30,000 or $140,000 through their own efforts. So fantastic. But they had it on the calendar that it starts in October. And what are we sending out in October? And what are we sending out in November? How is that going to conflict with our Giving Tuesday, or can we tie it in nicely? And then what happens in December? So October, November, December, we do the letters. That's what we put on the calendar. We follow up with phone calls. The last 3 weeks of the year, we move to mostly digital. It's email campaigns, it's social media, still with the phone calls, but so again, mapping that all out. So let's talk about an actionable strategy for major gift cultivation. So if we go back to the slide where we were saying we wanted to bring in, I can't remember what the amount was, $100,000 in major gifts from 5 donors. Okay, so we could host 3 private dinners with prospective donors throughout the year, schedule 10 one-on-one meetings with board members to cultivate relationships, and send a personalized stewardship report to our major donors, showcasing their impact. So this would be the strategy. We've got the goal. We know what we want. We said we wanted 100,000 in major gifts, and we're going to cultivate relationships. The deadline is December 31st. Now we have the strategy. And this is an element of the strategy. This is an example. I'm sure there are other pieces to it because we want to make sure we include the end of year appeals, inviting people to events, etc. For grant applications, we're going to research 5 new funding opportunities by March 15th. Research, come up with the deadlines, figure out who their board members are, figure out what the timeline is for their LOI and their proposals. Do they do site visits? Is it competitive? Is it discretionary funding? Is it through connections? What does it look like? So that we have in our chart of our funding opportunities, which, by the way, if anybody would like me, maybe I'll just go ahead and do that. I always keep a little list of the things that I want to provide for you guys after the session. I'm going to give you a copy. It's here. I'm going to give you a copy of our grant research spreadsheet. And the last column is what are the next steps? We want to work. We're not going to dabble. We're not just going to look at this on a Saturday morning, go into Foundation Directory or Grant Station or Grant Tracker or wherever it is that you like to look for funding and just say, okay, well, I think I've got a few that we're going to work on. Hey, Mary, can you do a little research on this? No, we are going to do the deep dive. We are going to know everything about that funder. That's what research is, so that we are teeing ourselves up for the next steps. You're going to have to go through 100, 200 funders to be able to come up with these 5 that you can really clearly map out by March 15th. We're going to submit applications for at least 3, and again, we're back in the education example, 3 education-focused grants by the second quarter. We're going to develop a grant calendar with deadlines and task assignments for the year. So that's where your spreadsheet comes in as well. So that would be your actual strategy for your grant applications. We can't just say we're going to go after new grants. Great. How are we doing this? Now, the research 5 new opportunities by March, your research needs to continue. You're going to need 5 more by June 15th and 5 more by October and 5 more by December. This is an ongoing process. And you're building that spreadsheet of funding opportunities. But we want to get it to the point where we know what the next steps are. Some of the next steps require a phone call. Some of the next steps require registering on their website so that you can, because they're going to communicate with you the deadlines that are coming up. Maybe It's a community foundation, and this round of funding is only education-based, not health and wellness. So you have to make sure that you've mapped all this out, you know exactly where you're heading, and you know what your next steps are. Is it to sign up on their website? Is it to make a phone call? Do they invite phone calls? If they've put their phone number on there and an email address on there, have a conversation. Great. When are you going to have the conversation? March 16th. I am calling Allegheny Franciscan. I am calling the Community Foundation. I'm going to find out more about this and see what their deadlines are. Or maybe you do that in advance so that you've really teed up what you can do by March 16th. But that is a strategy. A strategy is not, we hope that we're going to get more funding from foundations this year. You may also consider reaching out to other organizations. If you have a close relationship with other nonprofits, you may have the opportunity to reach out to another executive director or staff member and ask them what their experience with that funder has been. Do you think this might be a good fit? Especially for organizations. We have one in Palm Beach County that supports lots of smaller organizations. Well, they get supported year after year. They would be probably delighted to share some information with you about their funding, their experience with a particular foundation. But otherwise, reach out to someone who might know a little more about it, talk to a consultant or a grant writer or a grant researcher, or just do your own research. Find out what their culture is like. You know, I said some of them like phone calls, some of them don't. Some of them don't want you to reach out to them. They really want this all to be done through a portal. Okay. Pay close attention to the details, pay close attention to what they're asking for. Research also means, what do they need from you? Do they need audited financials? Do you have audited financials? No, you don't. Okay. What's the alternative? Well, maybe I have a phone call with the grants director and I ask them if they would accept a 990. Last year's 990, not a postcard, but a full 990. But that's all part of your research. We want to tee ourselves up so that we have everything ready. You've got your Google Drive folder with all the pieces that they want. Oh, they want a list of your board members and their community involvement. Oops, I don't have that. All right, well, I better start getting that together. So your strategy for each of these areas has to be deep. It has to be deep because this is how you are breaking out your tasks that are going to go into your plan. So you can look quarter by quarter, you can look month by month, and then I like to put extra tabs, have week by week, who's doing it, what do they need from me? Oh, they don't have foundation directory access. Okay, do we want to sign up for a month? If we're going to do the deep dive, let's go ahead and do it, or a grant tracker or grant station. So really doing a deep dive, not just kind of superficially skimming. What about for our donor stewardship plan? What would our strategy be there? We are now going to send handwritten thank you notes to all donors within 48 hours of a gift. I would suggest you come up with a cutoff, you know, at what level, right? So maybe not the $5 gift. Maybe it's going to be everyone over $50, $100. You're going to do a handwritten thank you note. Depends what your threshold is for your giving, who's a major donor, who's a kind of medium donor, et cetera. But come up with what is your strategy going to be? They should all be getting an immediate thank you. So if you can generate that via email and get that out within 48 hours, fantastic. But there's a great connection that can be made through handwritten thank you notes. There's a great connection that can be made by board members. I do this a lot when I'm coaching on the major gift cultivation and solicitation. I'll say, okay, let's find 2 or 3 board members who are happy to pick up the phone and thank a donor. They're not asking for checks. Every board member says, I can't go out and ask for checks. Like, great, I've got another job for you. It's just as meaningful. It's just as impactful, if not more. It's thanking people. Easy. Calling people and thanking them for their gift. And by the way, I'm a board member. I'm heavily invested in this organization. I'm so delighted with your gift. I had to reach out personally. You don't know how much it means to us to get your gift of $1,000 at this time. We are launching something new, and it's just great to have your commitment. Can I tell you a little bit more about what we're doing? Should we set up a call maybe in a few weeks and I can fill you in on how things are going? Is there anything, or even better, I'd love to hear what inspired you to make that gift. Was it something you saw, you heard? Was it the event that we held? Was it because you're good friends with so-and-so and maybe not that because you don't want to disclose donors to them, but if you know already that there's a connection. But that's a great way to start a conversation. And the thing is, that's your common thread, right? That would be the board member who's really passionate about the organization, the donor who's now expressed their financial commitment. There's alignment there. There's a conversation to be had there. You already have something in common. So that's a great way to include board members in your donor stewardship and in your strategy. But again, in the planning process, who are the 2 or 3 board members willing to do it? Are they easy to get a hold of? Can you just shoot them a quick text, or can you send them an email and say, hey, I'd love for you to call John and his wife and thank them for their gift? Are they going to follow through on it? But line it all up, get it ready. Creating quarterly email updates. I love this. I like this to be distinguished from newsletters. Newsletters should go out to everyone, but a quarterly email update could go out to your specific donors as opposed to donors and prospects, almost like a mini impact report. You could host a donor appreciation picnic event, anything, right? Anything you can think of, host something where you're really appreciating your donors and you're not making an ask. And by the way, when we think about those we had on the earlier slide, major gifts, so 3 private dinners. The private dinners, those are not ask events. Those are building relationships. We are looking at ways to really get connected to people and have them learn about the organization. We should never think that we're hosting a dinner and people are just going to give right on the spot. And nor should we really be asking. This is an opportunity for them to learn about the organization. So just be thoughtful and intentional about how you're using some of these events. And don't be disheartened. If the board says, oh, well, we've got this dinner coming up, how much money are we going to raise? Nope, this is not about raising money. This is about getting an exclusive group of people together that are going to hear from our executive director and our board member or a couple of board members about what this organization does. But the rest of the time should be social, should be networking, should be, talking about things, getting to know them a little bit better, not an ask. An ask comes afterwards. It's after you've built the relationship. Remember, we're not in fund development, we're in relationship development. And then let's say we need our priorities for community engagement. Okay, we could launch a day of service event, inviting donors to volunteer with beneficiaries, if that's something that your organization can do. Use social media to highlight a donor of the month, sharing their story and impact, or even a beneficiary of the month. Partner with a local business for a round trip at the register fundraiser. So, all of these roundups, things like that. I'm not a huge fan. I'm seeing so many of them that I think it's sort of diluting it a little bit. But I do think there's partnering with local business. Like I said before, if you can identify 1 or 2 that really become your champions in the community, that can be great for community engagement. So we've talked a little bit about some examples of what a strategy could be. Do you feel that I've given you enough here to be able to come up with your own strategy? Yeah, okay. Enough that even if you just have 2 or 3 initiatives and you build out the strategy, you know what you can double down on, and you know where you can get help. So if we've worked on this enough, we know where we can plug our donors in, because if we sit in a board meeting and the board members say, well, how can I help? Well, we just need you to fundraise. It's a very different conversation than if I say, well, Jane, you said you're very social and you'd love to host a couple of dinners. Let's go ahead and sit together and map those out on the calendar. When do we think we could get one, before October? What would be a good time for you? Start being very systematic and very thoughtful and very intentional about how you engage them and involve them. Maybe it's the grant research. Great. Who can I engage? When can they start? What tools do they need? Being very, very specific. The thing is, we have so many other things going on. All of us do. You have so many other things going on. If you can narrow this down to 2 or 3 and be really deep and deliberate in those 2 or 3, you will make headway. I guarantee you will make headway. You have to follow through, but you will make headway. So then let's talk about the timeline, the milestones, how we're going to really make sure that we've organized ourselves to deliver on this. Let me share my screen again. Okay. So we want to create our structured timeline. It's going to include the milestones. It's going to include our accountability measures. We are going to have our route mapped out. We're going to have our checkpoints along the way. We're going to have someone kind of leading the effort, tracking progress. We need to know when everything is happening, who is responsible, how it's going to be measured. And we really need this on a monthly basis. We need this on a weekly basis. And making sure that we've mapped this out in advance, we can work our way backwards. So between the structure, the consistency, the efficiency, we can really, really get ourselves organized. So let's talk about what that might look like on a quarterly basis. You know, I'm all about examples. So let's say for January through March, we are really focused on 2 or 3 things that we know we want to accomplish. So it's developing a fundraising calendar for the first quarter. Great. That's a wonderful thing to accomplish right now, this quarter, this month, this week. We're going to identify our grant deadlines and application schedule, and we're going to engage our lapsed donors with a re-engagement campaign. This is a good time to do that as well. We haven't really talked about your lapsed and Libunts and Cybunts. So last year, but not this year, some year, but not this year. So those are all lapsed donors. Those would be the donors that they've given in the past, but maybe they didn't give in 2024 for whatever reason, or maybe they stopped giving in 2022 and we don't know why. So it is really, really important that you spend the time to figure out why they lapsed, if there's anything you can do to re-engage them, and then double down on that re-engagement effort. It is so much more difficult to attract new donors. When people tell me about their Libunts and Cybunts, and I say that because that's an acronym that's heavily used in the development world, you can run reports. Bloomerang happens to be my favorite software CRM donor database platform right now. It's already in there. Run your Libunt report, run your Cybunt report. And there's sort of this feeling that comes over people and they just, oh my gosh, look at all these people that used to give to us. What happened? Like, where did we fall short? How could we have let these people slip through the cracks? We'll never get them back. They've probably gone with another organization. Maybe they've had a family crisis. Well, we don't know that. We don't know we can't get them back. Did we try? Did we try hard enough? So a personalized approach with your donors, particularly if they are significant in any way. Did they give consistently over a long period of time? Did they make phone calls and reach out in person? Did anyone on the team or on the board have a relationship with these people? You can re-engage your lapsed donors. So don't lose hope on those folks, but you do need to keep, again, it's another strategy. Maybe this isn't the SMART goal for you. Maybe you just have to let this go for now, right? But just keep it on your radar. Second quarter, we can host a mid-year donor appreciation event, launch our spring fundraising campaign, begin our corporate sponsorship outreach for year-end giving. I would suggest starting your corporate sponsorship in your outreach in the first quarter, because I'm seeing more and more corporations and companies saying, you know what, you've already missed, our first round of funding, which will come through November, December. Now we're looking at the next year. So Q2 might be a little late. So just keep that in mind. Unless you have events and you have specific corporate sponsors for events. So when I say corporate sponsorship, corporate partnership, I'm not just talking about, I see someone coming in, I'm just going to admit them. I'm not just talking about events. I am talking about just your partners as well, your annual partners. Events are great for corporate sponsors and very necessary if you're having your gala that's going to have 1,000 eyeballs looking at your materials and looking at who your sponsors are. But also just your partners for the year. Who are the partners who are going to come by your side and support your organization for your operations throughout the year? Third quarter, maybe we're going to submit some grant applications. We're going to implement a peer-to-peer fundraising campaign, and we start to plan for year-end appeals. And then the fourth quarter is, did I say third quarter? Fourth quarter is Launch Giving Tuesday, holiday campaigns, hosting a final donor stewardship event, conducting an annual review of our fundraising successes and areas of improvement. So that would be on a quarterly basis. So very broad. And I like to work my way in. So we're going to start with the bigger picture and kind of hone in. And let's see, why won't this advance? Okay. So then we have our monthly timeline. Let's say we have for our first quarter what this timeline looks like. And again, this is broad still. We haven't drilled down to the details, but for the month of January, we're going to launch our New Year, New Goals email campaign. How can the board be a part of that, or how can the board be engaged? Hold a board retreat to set strategic goals, to fill them in on what we're doing, what the fundraising plan is for the year. What can we do on the marketing side? We can publish a New Year blog post on the website. We could begin our outreach to major donors, recruit 2 new board members, update our donor database and segmentation lists. For February, we've got a list there. For March, we've got a list of things we want to do. So now we've taken our first quarter goals and we've broken them out into what does that look like month to month. And then let's go into the accountability. So what is that going to look like when we think about who's taking responsibility? So we really have we don't have, well, I'm not going to say guaranteed because there is no guarantee of success, but I will say you have a much better chance of success if you have assigned ownership, if there is responsibility and accountability. So what does that look like? Well, we know that each task needs to have someone who's overseeing it. We need to make sure we're doing those check-ins. So when I was talking about coaching a group on major gifts, we sat on a call, went through our list and assigned a name to each person on that list and who was going to be calling them, when they were going to call them, did they have a script for that phone call? So again, the more you prepare, the more you think ahead of time. On my spreadsheet, oh, we're making these calls to major donors. Okay, who's making the call? Oh, we've got some board members that are involved. Great. The first thing the board member is going to say is there a script? What am I going to say? Let's go ahead and write up a script. Give them a script. Give them everything they need. Oh, well, what if they ask me if we have an impact report? What if they ask me how they can look us up? Give the board everything they need. Oh, they can go on GuideStar. They can look us up on GuideStar. Oh, great. Is everything in order? Do we have all of our registry? Yep, we have everything in place. I have a script for you. You can feel good about our compliance efforts, and you can, provide them with some statistics on what we accomplished last year, and just have that ready to go. So again, giving them everything they need to be able to make the phone calls, to be able to make the outreach. But then I mentioned, excuse me, we have a weekly call. That's the check-in. That's where I hold them to task. I know that they have a hard time doing it themselves, so I will do that for them. I will go through the list and say, okay, what barriers did we have? What challenges did we have with these phone calls? Did we just not get to them? Did we get to them, but we had pushback? We had people that didn't pick up the phone. Okay, so we had, out of 10 people, we had to leave voicemails for 6. All right, what's our strategy? Now, if I don't have that weekly check-in, I don't know that there were 6 calls that went to voicemail, and I can't start working on that little challenge with solutions and ways to fix it. So we can't leave this open-ended. We can't just say, okay, well, these are the people, and let me know how that goes. It's not going to work. Regular check-ins, have them on a calendar. Maybe it's you, maybe it's a development committee. Again, I want to encourage you to think outside of yourself. Who else can help you with this? Maybe it's a VA that you have that is collecting the information. They're checking in with each of the people that were assigned some names, and they're saying, okay, can you give me your updates? I'm going to put them in a report because we're going to get that out every Friday. Great. So there's an example for you as well. Now let's look at the responsibility matrix, what this could be. So this is an example. So the goal or initiative could be recruiting 2 new board members, and the responsible party would be the board chair. The deadline is January 31st. We have the status. We have a check-in date. It's a little fast. Hopefully they've already got 2 board members teed up, because that's a little fast if we were thinking of, starting first of the month. But it can be done if you've already got some people in your ecosystem. Otherwise, I would push it out to March. Maybe it's recruit 1 board member. Maybe it's actually orienting board members. If you have grown organically and some of the board members that you have in your organization have been there since the beginning of the organization, the launch of the organization, it may be time to do a reset or a recalibration, where you just do professional development for one of the board meetings. You take an hour, you review everything as if you were doing an orientation or an onboarding of new board members. It's a good thing to do. Remind them where the bylaws are, give them some highlights from the bylaws. Yes, we are required to have quarterly board meetings. We do it monthly. I just want to point out, in our bylaws, our maximum number of board members is 15. Right now we have 6. We have lots of room to grow, so bring some things to their attention. But an annual reset for the board is really good. So you could put that on here as a goal or initiative. Submitting 2 grant applications, going down to the 4th one. Okay, who's the responsible party? Maybe it's a grant writer, maybe it's you, maybe it's a volunteer or a board member. What's the deadline? What's the status? Let's have a check-in date. The check-in dates, I do like consistent check-in dates, so I wouldn't just put April 10th. I would probably say every 2 weeks, or something like that. So that would be your responsibility matrix. And then tracking progress, looking at a full year end. So what did we accomplish? What were some of the details? This is a good example. Key wins: we raised this much money. We successfully engaged 30 new mid-level donors. We hosted a record-breaking spring gala. What were the lessons we learned? What are the goals for next year? So now we're actually already building out our plan for next year. So end of year review can happen in November, December. I would start probably in November, taking a look at that. And then in January, you can gather information based on your end of year review. But make sure you do that, because it's a good little dashboard that you can present to your board. If ever you feel like, I wonder if the board really knows what I'm doing. I wonder if they know what we accomplish every year. Well, having something like this, where we're tying this back to the plan and what we accomplished, is a really, really great way for them to see the work that's being done and who's doing it and how effective it's being. It also, again, gives them an opportunity to get involved, because they can see the work being done. They can see that there's engagement. And then they also see that there's an opportunity where maybe they can get some ideas for how they could help you and they can support you. Do we have any thoughts, comments on all of that? Okay, so what I'd like to do is I'm going to show you, so some of you will already have seen this, and I apologize if it's repetitive. Eduardo, I know you have seen this, but I'm going to show you what a plan could look like. And it's one of my favorites because there's a good bit of detail, and you'll have access to this as well. I'm going to share my screen. And again, it just gives you an idea of the pieces that we worked on separately all come together in a plan like this. This is by CauseVox. Again, it's one of my favorites because it comes pre-built for you. It's a template, and you can just work your way through it. You can make it as detailed, time-bound, goal-connected as you'd like. But the goal, really, the plan for us, or the objective, the outcome, is to come up with something like this where you've captured all of it. Now, in my world, when I do something like this, I have one summary page like this, but then all of those other charts that we just looked at, those tables that we just looked at, I put those in tabs. So I would have the tabs at the bottom, maybe the responsibility matrix. Maybe I would have the strategic priorities. Maybe I would have the fundraising goals. And so whoever is responsible for that particular area can go into, or if they have questions about something that's come up, oh, new donor survey. What's this with the new donor survey? Okay, let me see where that came up in the strategy and the resources that were needed. What were the dates on that? Who's supposed to be involved? So, and if you can, obviously, if you can hyperlink this to the tab that's relevant, it's an easy way for people to access and go back and forth. But you want to have your whole year mapped out. You want it in detail. Ideally, if you can put in some results from a prior year so that there's a method of comparison. But this can be really, really helpful. But again, this is just a spreadsheet. If we haven't put in the effort to do the work with the SWOT, the SMART goals, the strategic priorities, the strategy, your action plan for each thing, then you're just kind of, it's, you're sort of putting this together, but it's a little bit random. And we want to make sure that this is very deeply connected to what you decided were going to be the initiatives for the organization. Does anyone have any questions at this point on the elements of what we've done and how it all feeds into this master plan? And by the way, we've been calling this the annual development plan. I mentioned this earlier. You can turn this into your operational plan. You can incorporate your programming into this. All of your community events, anything you like, you can incorporate. It could be recruiting, it could be HR elements, recruiting people, training your team. I mean, if you'd like this to be an operational plan, not just development, have a separate tab, put everything on it, and then break it out into development, operational or organizational, programmatic, if you want to do it that way. Okay, I would like to hear some thoughts, some concerns. What's the first thing that bubbles up when you look at this and you think, okay, well, that all sounds great, but I don't know. What's the first thing? Well, I'm not going to put words in your mouth. What's the first thing that comes to mind as a potential obstacle?
Overwhelm. Just saying what everybody's thinking. And can I put the link to that fundraising plan calendar? I found it online and I downloaded it and it's amazing. Would that be okay?
Of course, of course. So you download it. I have it open for anyone to access. Let me grab the live link as well, and I'll put that in the chat. So Lisa, if you want to put in the static, oh, okay. Okay, great. Yeah, that's the live link. Okay, perfect. That's the web link. Fantastic. Did it work? Let me just make sure. So if I click on that, let's see.
Yeah,
okay.
I got mine. I have it in front of me, the exact thing you were looking at.
Okay, so that took me to the sign up. So let me give you the link because I've already here, I'll do the link. I made a copy of it so that everyone could access. I'll put that one in. But by the way, it is worth signing up because they have great information too. So okay, so this is the spreadsheet. You should all be able to access that. Okay, overwhelm. All right, fair enough. How about if we trim it down? Lisa, when you get started and you really launch this, what would be the two things that you think of right away that you're like, that's where I just don't even know. I don't know how I'm going to do it, or we have such a need for it. What would be two things that come to mind right away?
I think the hardest thing is the getting the donors, right? Just that's the grassroots, right? I have already started to reach out to people who I'd like to consider being on my board. So I've done a lot of like fundamentals, but it's that phone gets really heavy when you gotta have somebody for money. You know what I mean? So
Okay.
yeah, that would be my biggest challenge.
Okay.
And scripting, I think, is going to be very beneficial. I scripted, I have an event in March that not in August, excuse me, that's not necessarily a nonprofit, but asking for sponsorship dollars is getting easier as I do it, but it's still tough. That would definitely be the biggest hurdle.
You just hit on one of my favorite things, which is you gain momentum and you feel good about what you're doing when you start to have success. The only way to have success is to do it.
Right.
So we just, there is no way around it. If you have fear or discomfort around some of these things, you just have to get in there and do it. What I would say though is start with the least possible or the least potential ones so that if you stumble, if you feel uncomfortable, it's your prime opportunity.
Yeah. That's what I told a colleague of mine who's helping support that. Just start with these. If you mess up, you'll learn from them. And when we get to the big one.
Exactly. I mean, I've done this. I've done this even recently where I'm all ready and I sit down and I have the script in front of me of the wrong organization. I mean,
Yeah.
And that's what happens sometimes. So, I'm helping a few different organizations. And so I'm like, oh my goodness. But that's okay because I know them well enough that I can pull it together
Yeah.
while I locate my notes,
Right.
But start with the ones that you're less concerned about, that you're not thinking, oh, this is the big one that I don't want to mess up. Okay, so leave that one until after you've practiced. But I tell you, you start to gain momentum and confidence. Confidence comes from doing it and
Yes.
getting better at it. And you only get better at it if you keep
Do
doing
it. I know.
Yes.
Absolutely.
Same with major donors, same with foundations. And here's the thing. Most people want to be helpful. You're not calling the mean people. You're calling people that for some reason have come into your ecosystem. You've heard about them. And if they're not, then they're just not meant to be. So it's okay. You can just say, okay, that wasn't, you walk away from it.
Yeah. Favorite word is next.
There you go. Next. The other thing is it is a numbers game, just like sales. Just like sales. You are going to be talking to a lot of frogs before you get to someone who's going to say, wow, yes, I want to learn more. Or yes, I'm going to come to your event and I'm bringing another couple. Can we spend a little bit of time with you after dinner and just you can fill us in? You're going to have to get through a lot of calls to get there. That's okay. That's okay. I will say, whether it's a spreadsheet or a CRM, doesn't matter. Keep good notes. Everything they say is a nugget. And you need to keep good notes because if you're having help, Lisa, also, there may be a time in the future when you're speaking to that person, but you can reference the conversation that Sarah had with them last month or last year, right? So keep really, really good notes. That's your intel. That's priceless, that internal research, that knowledge that you gain from your conversations. The other thing is, no doesn't always mean no. It might be not now, right? Unless they say definitively, and you can ask them. I've done this many times. May I reach out to you later in the year? May I reach out to you as we get close to our end of year giving if we have a match opportunity? Would you consider stepping up and being part of a match challenge? Thank you for this lovely gift you gave last month, but could I reach back out to you? So give yourself all the things, and if you need to make a little list of the things you need to talk about or the points you need to hit on that conversation, go ahead and do it. With the corporate partnerships, try and get a face-to-face. Actually, with everyone, try and get a face-to-face. I know we all like the safety and security of sitting behind a desk and having a phone between us so that, we sort of put our little safeguards in place. There is nothing like face-to-face. And that means you need to be out too. You need to be out in the world. You need to be going to different events. You need to be going and circulating with people that don't normally come into your universe. You really have to make sure that you are a presence out there, that people know of you. And here's the thing too, it's consistency. The more you show up to these things, the more you're going to get to know people. They'll get to know you. So, there could be a donor advised fund holder who's asking their community foundation rep, hey, so do you know anyone who specializes in mental health for youth? Yeah, as a matter of fact, Lisa, she comes to our events all the time. You should learn a little more about their organization. You never know. You just never know. But if they don't know about you, they don't know you, they don't trust you, they don't know that you even exist, you're really setting yourself up for just an uphill climb. So make sure that you're out there, you're in the community, you're visible, people know what you do, and you're building authentic relationships. It doesn't need to be the first thing that comes out of your mouth. Make friends. Make friends, peers, colleagues, build your network outside of your comfort zone, outside of your normal circle, right? Just really, really make an effort to double down on those relationships.
So that's a perfect segue into sharing a little bit of information on another event that we're having where you can start to work on these relationships. Friday, February 14th, the day of love, we're going to have a For the Love of Nonprofits breakfast. It's not going to be anything fancy or anything, but we wanted to give you guys an opportunity to come together in person, connect with each other, see how we can learn from each other in the nonprofit community, but also connect with other people who may be interested in volunteering or working on a project with you, or maybe being a future board member. So we're going to invite everybody in the chamber, but I really want our nonprofits to be there. It's going to be free for you to attend. The South Broward Foundation will be covering the cost of this event. So I'm going to put that link into the chat so that you have it and you can sign up. Friday, February 14th, 9 a.m. for the love of nonprofits. So I hope you all can make it. But in the meantime, if there's any other questions, now's a great time.
Great. Okay. And let's see. Josepha, I know you'd like to connect. Hopefully, so Angie, everyone registered, so I'll get everyone's contact information. We'd love to do a little follow-up email after the training in case you have any other questions, in case there are any materials, right? So I talked about that grant spreadsheet. Do you have anything else that comes to mind? What else can I help you with? If I don't have it on hand, I will find it for you. I will get it to you. So yes, we can do follow-up 100%. Does anyone else have any other questions, comments? Aria, you mentioned volunteer commitment. I agree. Volunteer commitment is a very big challenge, and a lot of organizations have that as an issue. So what I would do for that is I would look at other organizations that have a nice, robust volunteer program, find out a little bit about them, how they do it. David, question.
Yes, if I may quickly. Thank you, Kristen. I love the idea of the whole volunteerism arena. That would be great. Another question I had, and maybe you've touched on this in other sessions, but in terms of strategic planning, leveraging external resources, or the balance between, I'm sure in a number of organizations like ours, I work at the Salvation Army. We do several things in-house, but we also are constantly experimenting with farming out, certain areas of marketing or grant writing, or PR, and just, leveraging, trying to get maximal output on us, with limited resources. That to me increasingly feels like an area that really needs tightening, which is, just the right balance of leveraging, internal and, external. I'm not wording it right, but I think you know what I'm saying.
Yes, I completely agree. And again, I would say the preparation is the biggest piece, because I have a lot of organizations that say to me, well, but everything is HIPAA protected, or it's this, or it's that. We can't have volunteers. Yes, you can. You can figure out tasks for them, but you need to sit down and figure out what those tasks could be, and then figure out what you need to implement it. But I do, I was just touring an organization last week, and I was so blown away. It's for kids, their headquarters in Fort Lauderdale. I could not believe how structured their volunteer program is, and how many incredible volunteers they have working with them. So there's a whole system to it that they've implemented. But all of you could figure out. Yes, thank you, Lisa. Go ahead. Anyone who needs to hop off, by all means. We're wrapping up here in a couple minutes. But really, that's a whole universe of its own, because, thank you, Dan, because sometimes you need background checks. I can help you with some recommendations on that. You may need a volunteer handbook. Thanks, David. But yeah, it's a whole other area that needs to be tackled. And maybe that is a strategic priority for you this year, So the last three, they're just three thoughts, 3 points I want to make. I mentioned that being superficial and dabbling, you must immerse yourself in this process. This is not about superficiality and just kind of skimming the surface. You need to be consistent. You have to deal with this every day, every week, every month. Stick to what you have committed to. If it's too overwhelming, back it down, commit to a little bit less. And then your mindset, don't be disheartened. We just talked about how many calls it's going to take just to get that corporate partner, just to get that donor to give, to get that potential board member to even attend as a guest a board meeting so that they can learn about the organization. But your mindset is critical. So you have to focus on the wins, align yourself with people, with peers that are going to be encouraging and supportive. This chamber is amazing. It's a perfect example of where you can draw strength from. But don't be discouraged, because I know this can be a lonely journey. And there can be times when you wake up in the morning and you just think, how on earth am I going to get this done? Set some realistic goals for yourself, have some wins, make some phone calls every day, chip away at it. But your approach is going to be key. And you have to, again, stick to that vision. Remind yourself every single day what the vision of this organization is. How am I going to put myself out of business? How am I going to accomplish all of this? So those 3 things: be consistent, immerse yourself in this, and really take care of how your approach is. And by the way, donors are attracted to your energy and your passion, not being in survival mode, not, well, we may have to shut down if we don't. They want to be with winners. So let's set ourselves up for success by really focusing on those 3 things and then putting your planning in place. To me, it's key. So thank you all so much. If you have any last thoughts, I know we're going to wrap up here, but I'll stay on for a few minutes if anyone has any additional thoughts or questions. I'm here for you, so just let me know. But thank you all so much for joining today. And thanks again, Angie and the Chamber and the Education Foundation, Broward Education Foundation. Really appreciate it.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Kirsten.